Good morning. If everybody would take their seats, we'd like to get started. Now that I've asked you to please be seated, would you please stand and let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. My name is Bill Burke. I am a retired Army engineer and a member of the Board of Directors of the Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Center. And it is my indeed pleasure to welcome you here today. I'd like to begin by recognizing a few folks. We have Representative Skip Diggs here today. From the Barnstable Board of Selectmen, we have Paula Shep, Chris Clark, and Paul Cusack. Thank you. Matt, sorry, Matt. And I would especially like to thank the Hyannis Elks Lodge 1549 for a beautiful spread in the back for everybody to share. Today is our 6th annual town hall. It's an opportunity for combat veterans to be able to share their experiences with the community. That was the original intent by Sebastian Younger, in that those who haven't served really don't understand what our combat veterans went through. And so this presents that opportunity in this kind of a format where I know there's more than just veterans here today. So maybe we start with all the veterans in the room, please stand. As always, thank you for your service. Each speaker today will speak for about 10 minutes. No politics, just their experiences. So let's begin with Sergeant Ronald L. Timms, United States Marine Corps from Desert Storm. Oh, sorry. They didn't give me very good instructions here this morning. Let me introduce Jim Seymour, the Executive Director of Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach.
That's perfect. Try to keep up with us, Army, all right? It's not easy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Seymour. I'm the Executive Director of Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach, and I'm a Navy veteran. And it's a privilege and an honor to be here this morning when it looked like I might not be here this morning. I had some medical issues earlier in the week. And thanks to my doctors, I'm here. I negotiated, and you don't negotiate with doctors very often. I negotiated to say this was very, very important to me to be here. And I want to thank my staff. They've done a remarkable job this week. This is our High Holy Week, all right? And I've been home or in the hospital or whatever, and they've stepped up, and they've done a great job. And I just want to acknowledge them. Brooke, thank you. Mary Rose, amazing, thank you. Martha, Danny, Guy, our ace volunteer, Robbie. Stand up, Robbie. We have volunteers. Look at, doesn't he look awesome? Brian is our housing manager. Brian, I know you've been out of pocket a little bit and still managing things for us. I'll get back to you in a second. Barbara Ann, thank you. She's spearheaded this effort along with the town of Barnstable. and assisted by Rebecca and Angela. Angela is our transportation manager. The folks that do the people work are the next two folks, Kerry Dobson, who's our manager of case management services, and Paige, who's one of our case managers. Thank you, ladies, for being here. And, you know, when you're out of pocket, you rely on cell phones and everything else. And Mike Gleason is my number two. He keeps me on the straight and narrow, and he managed things so well this week in my absence. And we're ramping up for Thanksgiving, which we're preparing this year scarily for over 400 families that we'll feed for Thanksgiving. Last year, Mike, what was it, 200? 120. So, yeah, it's almost 300% increase, and it's just the reality of it. But more importantly, today is about celebrating and acknowledging veterans, those who gave of themselves to serve. I grabbed a coffee this morning at Dunkin' Donuts, and this little 4-year-old kid with his mom looked up and said, "Thank you." And I'm trying to figure out why, and then I realized how I was dressed, and it made sense, right? And I looked at him and I said, "You're welcome." And he gave me a salute. Little kid. So for everybody that served, that's for you, okay? And we've had a really great run the last 6 or 8 weeks. We celebrated our 40th anniversary of this organization, which is absolutely amazing. And some founders are here when we started out as non-vets, and today we are Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach. We did a stand-down event 2 weeks later where we had over 400 people come through the Cape Cod Irish Village, both veterans, volunteers, and sponsors. But what I'd like to do is, instead of listening to me talk about what we do and how we do it, we commissioned a new video on our 40th anniversary, and I'd like to share that video with you. Brooke, could you please share that? Thank you.
The founders of the Veterans Outreach Center, who were all Vietnam veterans, did not succumb to the brutality which had engulfed them both during and after their service. Just as they had fought in the war, they had to fight at home for the services they and their brothers and sisters had earned. This resilience was the driving force that formed this organization 40 years ago. With approximately 20,000 Vietnam veterans on the Cape in the early 1980s and no local support, the closest VA facility was in Brockton, over 60 miles away. In 1982, one of the early members had compiled a mailing list of every Vietnam vet in the area and sent out a letter to those identified, soliciting attendance in regular meetings, which at the time only offered hot coffee, conversation, and the chance to connect with other Vietnam vets. Attendance at these meetings grew, and thereafter, nonprofit status and an initial allocation from the State Department of Veterans Services was obtained, establishing the first official office of the Nam Vets Association of the Cape and Islands, today known as the Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Center. After 40 years of service to our military veterans and their families, the fruits of that initial labor continue to thrive and expand. Today, there are 19,000 veterans on the Cape and Islands, nearly 6% of all veterans living in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Our professional team works to help veterans identify roadblocks or challenges they may be experiencing, with the goal of helping veterans achieve success and sustainability when they land back on their feet. In the past year, the Veterans Outreach Center provided 823 counseling sessions to our veterans and family members, as well as 259 referrals related to housing, medical records, and Social Security.
Case management is multifaceted. It involves, first and foremost, meeting people where they're at and listening to what they may need. It's talking to another person rather than going online and Googling where you can find resources. It's support, it's guidance, it's the human touch, it's making connection, and that's important. To build that relationship and rapport with people.
Our case management efforts are focused on assisting veterans in finding safe, dignified, permanent housing through weekly services that are provided at no cost for those in our housing program. Starting with the Dennis House, built in partnership with the town of Dennis in 2021, our goal has been to meet the needs of the veterans we serve. Our newest plans for expansion are on Martha's Vineyard Island, and they include the construction and operation of 12 new affordable housing units that we expect will come online late next year or early in 2025.
We know that the housing issue on Cape Cod is a major crisis. It's very difficult to maintain housing here on the Cape, especially those on fixed incomes.
There is no housing on Cape Cod for veterans. Our program helps meet that need, that we make sure they're in a safe environment where they can go. Again, they can feel secure. They can know that they'll be treated with dignity.
To meet an increasing demand for food among veterans and their families, the Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Center constructed a 1,250 square foot food distribution center that today supports 14 food pantries in Wareham, Falmouth, Hyannis, Eastham, and Martha's Vineyard. Critically, we now serve more than 205 families weekly, an increase of 364% since this time last year.
If you were to come in and see our pantry, it is filled to the ceiling with an incredibly large and growing distribution program. Our pantry is filled with as much product as we can possibly bring into it, and we have so many needs in order to keep helping this community. When I started a little over a year ago, we were helping here in the Hyannis Pantry location about 23 families during the day and an additional 2 or 3 families at night. Our food distribution pantry this week will help 150 families. And that growth has made such a difference in so many veterans' lives.
With funds raised through the generosity of our grantors and friends, a new refrigerated box truck was also purchased, supporting a home delivery program of fresh food to housebound veterans so that no one who served our nation would be left without daily nutrition. As it became clear that many of the veterans we serve are often unable to leave the Cape for their critical medical needs, a vibrant transportation program was established.
A little over a year ago, I started the transportation program for veterans, and it was such a huge need and has grown exponentially that we ended up having to hire a person to be able to do this full time. We do medical rides and we do mental health rides, and these veterans would have no other way of being able to get to their appointments. Dialysis is one of them, as an example. They're life-sustaining services.
Outreach to our veterans is a major key to bringing them together, not only to benefit from our services, but most importantly for each other in mutual camaraderie.
So we have a program that we called Veterans Rendezvous Cafe, and the reason for that rendezvous is a meetup point in the military. Veterans either come on their own or we pick them up, and they're brought to a central location, and we ask them what they want. And sometimes it's a speaker about maybe veteran benefits. Sometimes it's Irish step dancers. Other times it's making a craft or painting. Each time they visit, in addition to having coffee, and the most important piece is the camaraderie. They are what get me up. Sadly, they're also what keeps me up at night sometimes because I worry about them. And my dad was a vet, World War II bomber pilot vet, and I treat all of them as though each of them were my father or my mother. And it's very important, and that's why I do what I do, because they deserve the respect and the caring and the services that we have to offer.
It is no secret that the key to any successful organization lies with an experienced, dedicated team of talented individuals, supported and mentored by a capable senior executive. Jim Seymour has grown his team from 6 staff members to 14 highly seasoned senior-level professionals.
From my perspective in the last year and a half as executive director, I think we've really seen some phenomenal growth. We've had the right people in the right organization asking the right questions to keep us moving forward and make sure our focus is in the right lens of looking at what does the veteran need today and how are we responding to that. We were named a platinum level guide star for nonprofits, a 4-star rating in Charity Navigator, and most recently we're named a 2023 best employers or best places to work on the Cape. And those are no small part. Without the entire team,
Jim, in partnership with the board, directed an exponential expansion of our fundraising efforts that empowered the operating budget to grow from under $1 million in the fiscal year of 2022 to more than $2.3 million projected for the fiscal year of 2024.
I tell veterans every single day when they come in for assistance, I will meet you more than halfway, but you need to be part of this journey. If you were coming to us looking for a handout, that's not who we are. It's a hand up. It's to get you in a better place than when we encountered you so that you can be successful. The amount of work we're able to accomplish is a direct result of the amount of resources that we possess. We look every donation, every gift, every offer of support as incredibly valuable. It just helps us accomplish more each and every day.
No services like these are more well-deserved than those we provide to our veterans and their families, and none are more appreciated. And only thanks to the generosity of our donors, partners, and individuals that pledge to give back. Without all of you, the Veterans Outreach Center of the Cape and Islands would not exist today.
So I think that video tells a great story. And if you have any other questions about that, please, staff is going to stay here. They'll be around to answer any questions that you might have. And before I go to the speakers, I'd also like to introduce some of the board of directors that are here, because the board, along with the staff, are what make this happen. With the members of the board, please stand. Come on, you can stand up. The board's all volunteered. We get paid big bucks. So now, let me introduce the first speaker, Sergeant Ronald L. Timms, United States Marine Corps, Desert Storm.
When they first said no, I was like, okay, the Navy guy doesn't want the Marine guy coming up here now. So first of all, thank you, Cape and Islands Veteran Outreach Center. Thank you to our veteran service officers for this. This is my first time attending. I'm the commandant of the Cape Cod Marine Corps League, and a lot of times on this day, we're very busy. But tonight, we have our Marine Corps ball, so a lot of what we normally be doing today, we had to put pause for what's going on tonight. So having the opportunity. And I was hoping not to be the first person because I've not seen this. So I'm shooting from the hip without having an experience of seeing how this goes in the past. So thank you for this opportunity. So I was in Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. That was a very interesting time period, I think, for the military in general. Leading up to that, I'll admit, when Kuwait was invaded by Saddam Hussein in Iraq, I didn't know about it for probably a good 2-3 weeks before I finally started seeing it in the news. I'm at Camp Lejeune. I'm a young Lance Corporal, E3, just not paying attention to the world, just doing what I do every day. Let you know what I did. I was admin. I was a unit diary clerk, and then we got word that this thing's going on, and we're sending Marines over. And it was like, okay, cool. And there's a chance we'll get deployed. I'm like, I'll pack my typewriter and my pen. I'm ready to go. But it got serious. And on December 21st, we deploy out to Saudi Arabia. And this was great because when you look at past deployments in history and you see Marines or anybody else getting on like C-130s, and ships to go deploy, I'm thinking that's it. No, they put us on a commercial airline. I'm like, that's not what I was expecting. Okay, so I'm on a commercial airline with stewardesses, getting my cool little peanuts on the flight, really long flight, layover in Frankfurt, Germany. But when we landed in Saudi Arabia, it changed. Because as soon as we came off that plane, just open desert, wasn't quite that hot yet. Because we got there in December, that was another thing. We're like, we're going to the desert. Why do we need to bring our cold weather gear? Oh, it was cold. And we were like, it was close to freezing. We're running to supply like, hey, if you want to get paid, we need cold weather gear. So we started to make that adjustment, and we landed we started off at the Port of Jebel. And wasn't that was just to acclimate us there. And one of the first things they did is they grabbed a group of us and they said, you're going to be part of the anti-terrorism reaction force. I'm like, don't know why they picked me, but I was one of them. Luckily, nothing happened, but that was the immediate start of training. It's like, we're dealing with terrorism. They could be coming in at any time. You know, we look at the history of terrorism around the world. It's not like we weren't experienced with it as Marines. Places like Beirut, places that we've been before. So we knew how to react, and that's what we were going to start doing immediately. And also understanding anywhere we went, we didn't know if they'd be enemy or not. But because we were in Saudi Arabia, it was pretty friendly to us. And they were happy we were there because they didn't want Iraq to go from Kuwait and start invading Saudi Arabia. So we had pretty good control there. So after that port, after Port Jebel, we started going. We went to, I think, Brit was one, Mashab, and now things start getting heated up. Now, they tell Marines, and they teach us, and we go through basic combat training. Obviously, there's boot camp, but then there's Marine combat training for all Marines. Every Marine is a basic rifleman. And this happened. We get out, and we have a camp of just administrative Marines, okay? So we have computers, typewriters, 150 caliber machine gun, 260s, and we are the most forward unit of all units. And I did find out years later it was a logistical error. But we get to this camp, and there's this full bird infantry colonel. He's like, you are the tip of the iceberg. We're like, what? But we were ready. Why? Because we were trained to be ready. And while we were there, it was a few miles to the left was infantry, a few miles to the right was our artillery. And so we were prepared. And sure enough, one night, Iraqi helicopters are coming towards our camp. We're locked, loaded, ready, and it veered off, went somewhere else, and it was just somebody surrendering. And that happened a lot. If you remember the news, there was a lot of those that were surrendering prior and once the war started. And then we moved forward to another camp. But eventually we got leapfrogged, and we weren't the most forward unit. But our biggest threat was chemical warfare. I lived in a chemical warfare suit a lot. Just spent days in it at times. Anytime a Scud missile was launched, it was coming towards us, we had to get in full chemical warfare. We just learned to function. It was just part of it. When the air war started, somebody came running into the tent. The air war started. We run out to the dune. We were so close. We were literally watching planes bank and watching bombs just drop and explode in the distance. That was pretty exhilarating. And after we watched for a few minutes, we're like, cool, I'm going back to bed. Why? Because it's just what we do. And then the artillery started 24/7. And you just get used to it. We, as good Marines, we realized we needed some supplies, so we stole some wood from the Army so we could build shelves and stuff. But like some of the artillery would get a little close and stuff would fall off our shelves. We'd just wake up, put it back, go back to sleep. It was just life. But what made it really awesome was those who I was there with. One of my best friends is named Brian Dennison. He ended up being best man in my wedding when I got married years later. We were just together. We were tight. We knew we were there for each other, for one another, and we made the best of it. Now, when you have Marines in the middle of the desert, what I wasn't expecting were rats. There were a bunch, as we were digging in, the CBs would come in and they would bulldoze right down into the ground for us. So we'd build our tents there, give us some covering. But they would disturb all these rat nests. So we're out there, we're bored, and we're like, we just killed rats. And it was like, then it became like a body count thing. How many rats did you kill? You know, I walked by one platoon and they had rats on a stick outside their tent. You know, we're Marines, we gotta do something. So that was part of like how you make things fun in the worst situations. And some people are like, but we were just having a great time. We had the sergeant, now this might sound bizarre. We had the sergeant, he didn't look very big, but the guy was a beast, Sergeant Evans. And some nights he would just stop and he'd start going, the voices. And then he'd grab a stick and start beating the crap out of us. And nobody could beat him. But what was funny is we enjoyed it. We loved it. Why? It brought camaraderie. It brought us together. It was just something goofy, fun, in the mundane of everyday life in the middle of the desert, waiting for combat to happen. Luckily for me, sometimes I wrestle with it. I never got to do shots downrange. You know, never happened. I was even reluctant to talk at this because things I didn't see. Just because I know what some of you out there have been through, and I honor and respect that completely. I don't have a combat action ribbon, although I was in a combat zone. So I just want to let you know I honor and respect all that you guys have done, who've gone and done things before and after the things that I've done. But a friend of mine said, you were there, you volunteered, and you should speak. In fact, my friend VSO Kevin Vagley is the one who really encouraged me, and I appreciate that. So in short, I got to cut this, but 10 minutes went much faster than I expected. But I do want to say one thing before I step off. Thank you to Vietnam vets. When Desert Storm happened, America felt so bad the way you guys were treated, it went the complete opposite direction. And it was just outpouring of support, parades, constant thank yous. Now, I came back so late that by the time I got back, all of that was done. And it was just a good, nice job. Thank you. But I just want to say thank you to our Vietnam vets. We got the reward that you should have had. That's all I have. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Tech Sergeant Loretta Young, U.S. Air, Desert Storm.
Glasses. Good morning, everyone. I am Loretta Young, United States Air Force retired. I have enjoyed everyone and everything from today thus far. One thing about us veterans, we never get enough stories about our times in the military. But wait, is that just older people? I don't know. I am thankful to share some of my story while serving in the Air Force. But first, I want to acknowledge our guest speaker, U.S. Army Ranger and Barnstable Town Councilor Paul Cusack. That message, I felt as if I were there. Thank you so much. To all of the other speakers, great job. And to the Hyannis Elk Club 1549, thank you so much. And I can't go without thanking my family and all of the wives, husbands, fiancés, children, parents, siblings. Thank you You have shouldered the weight of the war. Where would people be if they didn't have someone back, knowing that they had someone that loved them back home? They wouldn't be able to make it out there. So thank you so much. And now to the staff and volunteers of the Cape and Islands Veteran Outreach Center that work so hard to keep us veterans. You really do. Thank you so much. We feel seen and heard there. A lot of times, as veterans, sometimes we don't feel seen and heard, but I feel seen and heard there. Thank you so much. I'm nervous and wanted to back out, but I had to remember this quote: "Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough." So here I stand, and you don't have perfect here. I served 20 years in the service, but I did not go to combat. Sometimes your age and your particular time in service does not allow you to see combat. I came in closer to the end of the Vietnam War. After that, it was pretty much a time of peace. We were processing that war. I give you men and women of the Vietnam War and every war and conflict my highest gratitude. You and I, we raised our hand and took an oath to protect and defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And at the end of that oath, with our hands still raised, we said, "So help me God." We are veterans, and we do not take that fact lightly. When I first retired, I did not even seek the VA. In fact, I went 18 years without bothering. I had internal hidden wounds. I ended up homeless for a point. I ended up living in a hotel for a short time. I didn't seek the VA. I just didn't know. I didn't think that they would help me. I felt that I didn't deserve to be affiliated. I had not been in combat. I came through during that time of peace, and I went deeper and deeper into a shell. I was so stuck. And one day, while reading the Bible, I came across a scripture, and it was from King David, where he said, whether they gave out the weapons or whether they used the weapons, it's all the same. And that helped me so much. I knew that I needed help, and that kind of pushed me forward, because we are all connected. The hand needs the arm. The troops need their paychecks. And as Isabella just said to me earlier today, we help where we can. We support where we can. After that, I was able to reach out for help. So, yep, I took that oath and got shipped off to basic training. And that is when it all hit the fan. All I wanted to do was go back to familiarity. I remember saying to myself, who are all of these people? And saying, you want me to do what? But we quickly learned to fall in line, didn't we? The eye rolling, the teeth sucking, and mistrust of people from all over the country. They came in from all over the country. And it developed into a camaraderie. And I thought I knew everything after basic training. So when they let me return home after basic training for a short time, I thought that I could easily make my own reservations to get back to tech school in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. I barely listened to the instructions on returning to Texas because I knew everything. I was told that someone would meet me and take me to the base, so I made those reservations. Upon arrival, however, I didn't see anyone to meet me. But that didn't bother me because I knew everything. After a while, I started asking, where is the van to take me to Shepherd Air Force Base? I'm in the military, and I just finished basic training, and I need to get to that base. They're waiting on me. Finally, someone overheard me and stepped from the crowd that I had drawn, and he held up one finger to interrupt me. He said, honey, I believe you're in the wrong state. I'd made my reservation, I thought, to Wichita Falls, Texas. I knew everything, but who knew that there was a Wichita, Kansas? That was the official start of my journey to many places to live or to temporarily work. I worked in Nebraska, California, the Philippines, Hawaii, South Korea, Japan, Belgium, Germany, England, and Washington, D.C. There, I lucked out to be an usher for General Chappie Jane's funeral. And I was also in the inaugural parade for President Ronald Reagan. I had the opportunity to work for Strategic Air Command and be a part of the mock trials of the decisions that must be made by the one in charge. It has let me know that all of these decisions are difficult. I have empathy for the ones in charge because I have a very difficult time trying to figure out which orange juice to buy. Do I want pulp? Do I want no pulp? Do I want calcium? It's hard. I had a memorable time while serving, and yet it was a difficult time too. I turned into a bingo fanatic to help me cope. Everywhere I went, I looked for bingo, and I found it. The clubs on base had bingo. The towns had bingo. But I got healed from that before it became such a huge problem. While in Okinawa, I was at the club on base to play bingo. I sat at my table, and 3 Marines asked very kindly if they could sit at my table while they played. I said, sure. I would enjoy the company. After about the 4th game, one guy mumbled, "She's not calling my numbers." The other Marine said, "Yeah, and I didn't even win yet." And the 3rd Marine stood up and said, "Yeah, let's go up there and kill her." Yeah, so when you said the rats, I'm like, oh, it's true, yeah. I am certain that this was a joke. But by the time they had settled down and sat back down, I was already back in my home and probably in my pajamas by then and cured of my bingo addiction. So if you want to be protected, call a Marine because they are not afraid. So I'm done sharing, and I say to my fellow veterans, we served for so many different reasons. We served honorably, and then we went on with our lives. So many did not, and we honor them. But we made it. May God continue to bless us veterans and the United States of America. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Staff Sergeant Dave Camposano, U.S. Army, Iraq.
Good morning. I just want to start by saying that serving in combat doesn't make the warrior, but raising your hand does. So I just wanted to say that to my fellow Marine over there in Loretta. Happy Veterans Day to everybody. It's an absolute honor and privilege to be invited to speak to a room full of my fellow veterans today. Your families and the community, and being able to tell you about what it means to be a veteran and tell you a little bit about my story. Thank you to the Cape and Islands and Rebecca for inviting me to speak today. Over the past few years, I've heard the term safe space being used to describe a place of non-judgment and comfort. And being a former reconnaissance soldier, I would use the term hide site to describe that. But being in a room full of veterans is my safe space or hide site. And although we bust each other's chops from time to time, you know, being from different branches, I can assure you, if we found ourselves in a local pub in trouble, we would all fall in and not only have each other's 6, but we would have each other's 12 as well. And that is what I will speak a little bit about today, covering each other's 12. So if you'll honor this old airborne ranger for just a minute, I'd like to share a story with you. My name is Dave Camposano, and I grew up in Norwood with 3 sisters and a brother. I also have a daughter, Isabella, who's here today, and my best friend, business partner, and fiance, Stacy, is here also. I served in the Army and deployed in support of the global war on terror. I served in the 10th Mountain Division, the 82nd Airborne Division, and I spent 2.5 years at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Course and School, training to become a Green Beret. I currently work as a wealth management advisor, and along with my fiance, Stacy, I run the nonprofit 22 Mohawks that focuses on veteran suicide prevention. While on active duty and in the infantry, life was hard. We would carry heavy rucksacks filled with ammo, radio equipment, boots, dry uniforms, and we would walk through swamps all day. We would parachute out of airplanes, and we would shoot our weapons day in and day out. When times allowed, we would talk about the things we would do and the goals we wanted to achieve when we got out. Go to college, work on the family farm, become a shrimp boat captain. You know, standard American stuff. After being discharged, I learned very quickly that serving your country and fighting in combat was actually the easy part. Coming home and being a veteran, that's the hard part. Your service doesn't end when your uniform comes off. If anything, your mission becomes harder, because now you have an obligation to the men and women to your right and left, but it's entirely up to you to hold yourself accountable. You don't have to get up every morning and do PT, because no one's making you, but just like on active duty, we are still obligated to protect one another at all costs. In 2014, while serving on active duty, I hurt my back and was assigned to an admin role while I waited to be discharged. During that time, I met Specialist John Hatfield, who was assigned to me. At the time, I didn't realize how significant my relationship with Specialist Hatfield would become. He was dealing with the same issues as I, and I beat myself up about not being able to serve in the infantry and parachute out of airplanes anymore. Every day, Specialist Hatfield would show up to work sad, and he would tell me too. He'd say, "Staff Sergeant Camp, this sucks. Can you help me?" And I took him under my wing and would do my best to shelter him from the madness of being an injured, lower enlisted guy in the infantry. Any of you in the infantry know that being a lower enlisted broke guy means that you're volunteered for every detail possible, doing dishes, funeral detail, and landscaping. Not playing infantry. And Specialist Hatfield hated every moment of it. It's not weak to feel down and to ask for help and for someone to listen. It's normal to feel down on occasion, and that's okay. It happens to us all sometimes. But it's not normal to the point where you can't function and you start to think about suicide. There are 2 types of weak, in my opinion. One, when you're feeling down and you talk yourself out of asking for help or for an ear to listen. I promise you, you're not burdening anyone. And don't ever think that. And number 2 is when someone asks you for help or an ear. You shrug them off with a "you'll be okay, suck it up." That's the weak man's out. Don't do that. Take every reach out as an opportunity to listen to your buddies. You may save their life. Someday you may need that ear. You may need them to be your ear. Again, during my time in the infantry, we would carry heavy rucksacks day in and day out. If you've ever carried a heavy rucksack that was more than half your weight for hours, you know it destroys you. It was not only physically painful, but mentally draining. As a warrior, we don't complain about that weight or the pain it brings you. Everyone is in pain and complaining about it would crush morale. There was a saying in the infantry, as I'm sure you all know, embrace the suck, which meant suck it up, drive on, and don't be weak. So we learned early on to not talk about the pain, physical or mental. When a buddy would die in combat, that same held true. Although a different type of pain, an emotional pain, we would still have to suck it up and grieve later. Empathy did not exist in the infantry. When the time came to take someone else's life, we had to shut off the ability to understand and share the feelings of another to do so. How could you kill the enemy when you were thinking about their family or their children? During training, we would train reflexive fire on targets at the range that looked like Taliban fighters. Ready, up, and the target would pop up and we would put 2 to the chest and 1 to the head. When the time came to fire our weapons at an actual terrorist, we would deliberately do the same thing without thought. We had no time to think about the killing. We had no time to remorse. We taught ourselves to shut off physical pain, empathy, and mental pain. And we did this for survival. It's a warrior's task. And after years with that mentality, without emotion, it becomes us. It becomes our way of thinking. And that strategy does work very well when we were professional warfighters. My daughter and I used to love to watch movies on Friday night and get pizza. For years, we did the same routine. would watch a couple movies, eat snacks and pizza, and it was the father's most precious moment with his child. Isabella would put her head on my shoulder, and I'd put my arm around her, and we would just stare at the screen. And when I first started this routine, I loved the feeling. I could actually feel what it felt like to love and be a dad. But as years passed and my military service became more violent, and my memories of those experiences would be relived, I lost the ability to feel that same feeling. I remember the feeling, but it just doesn't ever seem to come back. So to this day, I just go over the motions. And every time I see Isabella, she'll hug me and I'll put my arm around her, and she's none the wiser. She has no idea that I'm completely numb to that emotion, and I die inside every time. The pain from that is excruciating, and it keeps me up every night, and I wonder, truly, if I will ever feel that again. But onward we go, because people are counting on us. I recently spoke to a mom of two boys who were veterans. One had been out of the Army for many years, and the other recently retired after 23 years of honorable service. And she said to me with such a sigh of relief, she said, "Dave, I don't have to worry about my boys being deployed anymore, and it's such a relief." And I felt such a deep pit in my stomach when she said that. When we raise our right hand and deploy, we know and assume the risk we may not come back, or worse, have a life-altering physical injury like a lost limb. But we are okay with that. We are willing to walk into harm's way, no questions asked, for our fellow warriors. But when we come home and we think we are out of the dark, a lot of us aren't. A lot of us leave our souls in the combat zone, and the war never leaves us. Things like PTSD, TBI, and dealing with moral injuries and traumatic experiences and not being able to adapt to civilian life make our lives harder than it ever was during our time in uniform. Our only mission while serving was to make sure our brothers and sisters survive. In 2016, I was medically discharged. My plan was in place, and I was ready to tackle the 50-meter target, earn a degree from Suffolk University in finance, make millions of dollars, and that's all I cared about. Make tons of money and be successful, and nothing would get in my way. But then it did. In March of 2020, I saw a post on social media that Special Hatfield had died by suicide. He had died on October 14, 2017, 1 year and 6 weeks after I left service. He was discharged a few months after me. I realized at that moment that I had failed as a leader and failed my boy John. The guilt that I felt at that moment was so powerful. I had forgotten about John, and I lived my life selfishly and never checked in on him. And some people will say, "That's life, Dave. We move on and have our own lives, and we can't be expected to be there all the time." And I do believe that there's truth to that, but I also believe that when we know someone needs us, especially as warriors, we are obligated to be there, and as leaders, and at a minimum, check up on our buddies from time to time. The greatest gift the Army ever gave me was the opportunity to lead great men, and that shouldn't end because our service ends. John's death forced me to rethink my motivations and plan. Money was not the 50-meter target anymore. It wasn't even a target at all. John's passing inspired the creation of 22 Mohawks. 22 Mohawks came to fruition in April of 2020. And our mission is to help veterans lead themselves to find purpose, bring back empathy through social connection, and stop veteran suicide. Since September 11, 2001, there's been roughly 7,100 combat-related deaths. In that same time frame, there's been over 125,000 veteran suicides. A study done by the Michigan National Guard found that organizations that give dogs to veterans, that there's a 0% suicide rate. Every single veteran that's received a dog has died. I mean, it's still alive. Still alive. Since the start of 22 Mohawks, we have given 94 companion dogs, 1 service dog, and 1 cat. My time is up, so I'm not going to do anything else, but I want to leave you with this. Having the courage to admit weakness will save others who aren't willing to do the same. Don't let the preventable suicide death of our fellow veterans motivate you to take action. Check on your buddies now and regularly, because one day you may be the buddy that needs to be checked on. Today and every day, for the rest of my life, I will honor and remember the men and women who lost their lives to the internal battle here at home. It's not the length of life, it's the depth of life. Happy Veterans Day.
Our next speaker, First Lieutenant Clinton Jones, U.S. Air Force, Korea.
Just before I start, I want to pay my respect to you over there. That was a great story to tell. So good morning now. I am pleased to share my military experience with you today. Things happened very quickly to start it. Just before Christmas 1950, my mother called me at college to tell me I had a letter saying I was drafted for duty in the Army. I enlisted in the United States Air Force for duty on January 11th, 1921. During basic training in Texas, I applied to become a navigator bombardier. I was not eligible to be a pilot because I wear these things. On November 4th, 1952, I completed navigator bombardier training, became a second lieutenant, got my wings, and was on the way to Korea to fly B-26 combat missions. A B-26 was a World War II two-engine bomber used for lower-level night bombing and daytime reconnaissance. I was stationed at Kimpo Air Base, K-14, near Seoul, the capital of Korea, which changed hands several times during the war. I flew 35 combat missions. On bombing runs, we had two navigators, one to navigate and the other to direct the bombing run and release the bombs. After flying several missions, our crew was assigned to daytime reconnaissance. This was low-level flying, searching for and reporting enemy locations and weather conditions for daytime bombing sites, but for larger planes, that many came from Okinawa. Our coverage continued all over South Korea. God, I got all over North Korea, and we flew along the Yalu River and could see the enemy air bases just on the other side of the river. One of our missions took us down the Chinese coast heading toward Shanghai. One time in the clouds, we got off and found ourselves over Chinese mainland. Not a good place to be. Any combat mission is dangerous. North Korean air defense was nothing like the German air defense capability in World War II. And I just want to mention that as we reflect on those guys that were flying combat missions in B-17s during World War II. Living at Kimpo was not bad, certainly not like home in the United States. I shared a big tent with 5 other roommates. When not flying, days were long and could be boring. I played poker in most of my free time and won enough money to buy a new car when I came home. At the base, I had the use of a Jeep, and with my friends, we were able to visit Seoul, explore surrounding area, including an army post at the front line. We also visited an Australian Air Force Officers Club and got to know and party with many great Australian guys. The war ended on June 23rd. Of course, this was a very welcome day with much celebrating. When and now how one does get out of Korea. The length of a tour was 40 missions. The first group to leave consisted of those from 35 or more missions, and happily that included me. I left Korea in October. First stop was Japan. While there, I purchased a beautiful 12-piece set of china for my mother and one for myself as well, thinking, maybe one day I might have a wife sitting out there. Flown to the next stop was Edwards Air Force Base. I'm not sure I got that name quite right, in California. This was the entry point for those returning from Korea. I still had almost 2 years left to serve. At a later date, I received a Distinguished Flying Cross and an Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters for my service in Korea. My next assignment was the 1737th Ferrying Squadron at Dover Air Force Base. This turned out to be a very lucky and exciting assignment. After a visit to my home, I proceeded to Westover Air Base in Massachusetts for a 1-month reorientation for people returning to the United States from Korea. In other words, you know, you're out of there, you're here, type of thing. Then I proceeded to Dover. My first mission was to deliver a C-119 to Pisa, Italy. After visiting the Leaning Tower, I was flown to Rome in an old 3-engine aircraft, and then I flew first class back to the USA. When no Air Force plane is available for you to fly, you go home first class. I liked the sound of that. On a delivery of a C-119, it changed, however. On a delivery of a C-119 to Rhine-Main in Germany, an old B-29 was to be returned to the United States. On the way, we had a runaway prop, and that was a bit scary. Fortunately, we were able to feather it. This was not a first-class ride. Occasionally, I was sent to our sister ferrying squadron near Sacramento, California, to deliver C-119 is a cargo plane, you may know, and they were very much in being transferred around the world at this time. Returning to so I flew through Guam to get to Japan. Returning to the USA, the mission was to return a B-26 to Mather Air Base in California. The route was via Alaska. Weather was terrible, requiring us to make a difficult landing and we spent a night on Shemya, a very small island at the very end of the Aleutian Islands. The B-26 was delivered, and I returned to Dover. Many missions followed, mostly to places in Europe. My favorite mission was delivering the first C-119 to India, to an Air Force base adjacent to the Taj Mahal. That was something to see. I departed on December 19th, knowing I had to become home for my wedding on January 8th. In other words, that was pretty tight timing. Well, I guess I skipped a line. A highlight of the trip over there was stopping at Cairo, Egypt. On December 25th, I was riding a camel across the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Crossing the Indian Ocean, my navigation was a little wrong, and we approached Pakistan. We were escorted down the coast to India by 2 Pakistan-friendly fighter planes, almost waving. Being the first C-119 to India, we were treated royally. We were given Indian Air Force wings. So I'm in the Indian Air Force, I guess. My luck changed. The co-pilot and I became ill with dysentery. The co-pilot was sent to a hospital, but given the tight schedule, I was allowed to recover in the hotel. This is interesting. A bellhop who knew the Indian cure took excellent care of me for 4 days. I mean, pretty sick. I gave him $50, and he went down the hall feeling very, very wealthy. I mean, it was amazing, the difference at that time. I returned home first class, arriving January 5th. We are now married 68 years. Well, that ends a sharing of my military experience in the United States Air Force, which was really, really pretty darn good. I was honorably discharged on November 4th, 1955. In closing, I wish to thank the Hyannis Veterans Association, and I've had a lot of contact with the Transportation Department, so I say thanks, Angela, and for all that you all do for veterans. It's much, much appreciated. And then finally, Thanksgiving to you all.
Oh, Clinton, I have to ask, while you were in Korea, did you get to meet Ted Williams?
No, I didn't, but interestingly, Kimball had on our side B-26s, and on the other side was where Ted Williams was. So I didn't meet him personally.
Our next speaker, Sergeant Major Kent Carlson, Army, Vietnam.
Good morning. There we go. Good morning. I had the great fortune of being part of a very large family. I was a family of 12. My mother actually had 14 babies in 18 years. I'm lucky number 13. Two of the children did not make it. So of the 12 remaining children, all of us were veterans. All the boys served in the military, and all of my sisters married veterans or people that were serving at the time. So with that kind of environment that you grow up with, something was going to happen, and it was going to be the military. Now, when we grew up in the 50s and the early 60s, the world was a lot different place. Everybody had been in World War II or Korea. All the newspapers and all the movies and the magazines were all towards a more powerful United States. Our outlook on the world was America was always right, and people treated it like that. And we said, well, you know, when I graduate from high school, I've got one of two choices. I'm going to either go to college or I'm going to go in the military. And the reason it was so definite was because there was something called the draft. Now, the draft between 1960 and 1970 put 2.5 million people in boots, not all of them willingly. I, on the other hand, willingly went down to the draft board after going to all of the military services and saying, what are you going to do for me? I wasn't thrilled with the answers. So I went down to the draft board and I says, take me now. And that way there, if I liked it, I could stay. If not, 2 years, I can do it standing on my head. So I thought. Well, I got in the Army, and I decided I liked it. So I went to their school. I did very, very well there, and they trained me to be a spectacular infantryman. And came time for assignments, and they said, well, Kent, you're going to go to Germany. And I said, no, I'm not. My little brother at the time had enlisted in the Army, and he was in Vietnam already. I said, send me to Vietnam, because when I come back home, if he went to Vietnam and I went to Germany, I'm never going to hear the end of this. Besides the fact that as an 18-year-old, you're bulletproof. At least you think so in your head. And all the spectacular training that the Army had given me, I knew I could handle anything. So I get off the plane in Vietnam, and I said, what did I get myself into? It's not the paradise that we were told it was going to be. There's a lot of different smells and the heat and the humidity. And I'm an infantryman. Where am I going? Well, you're going to an aviation company. I says, wait a minute. Aviation company. I can't fix helicopters or airplanes. I can't fly them. What is an infantryman going to do? And it sounded like going back to basic training on those grunt details, painting rocks, doing KP, things like that. Well, it didn't happen to work out that way. I was sent up to the 282nd Aviation Company in Da Nang. And they says, hey, Kent, you're going out for a helicopter ride today. I said, oh, that's great. You know, I've never been on a helicopter. So they put me on the helicopter. I'm in the seat. Everybody has headphones connected, except for me. So we fly over to Da Nang main base, and all of a sudden, they shut the engine off. They're doing what's called an auto rotation. Well, I'm panicking. The helicopter's going to crash. I'm going to die in my first couple weeks on board. So we get down to the ground. They're laughing. I'm like this. And they say, what the hell just happened to me? They said, oh, we're doing an auto rotation. We have to practice that in case our engine gets shot out. And I said, well, nobody told me. He said, well, that was the point. We wanted to see if you're going to throw up or not. I didn't, so I became a door gunner. And so as a door gunner, I went from Da Nang. I went down to Queen Yan, which was the headquarters of our platoon. And from there, I went to Bambi Tuit. The unit at that time, the 282nd, was in support of the MACV program, Military Assistance Command Vietnam. And in Bambi Tuit, we supported the 23rd ARVN Division. We supported the Special Forces, and we supported any units that were in the area, the Special Forces and Marines and any, assorted type of people that were around there. So in Bambi Tuit, it was kind of neat because I didn't sleep in a tent. We were sleeping in a bungalow that was built in the 1850s for a hunting lodge. And as it turns out, Teddy Roosevelt had slept in that same bungalow, not the same bed, but in the same bungalow when he was over there hunting tigers in the rivers We were in the jungles and the woods of Vietnam. They had every kind of animal imaginable. And we were flying on slicks, which were cargo, medevac, and ash and trash, which meant we'd pick up VIPs and bring them from point A to point B. But along the line, occasionally we'd run into combat assault, and we would run into a landing zone when somebody decided to take a shot at you. And as a door gunner, it was my duty and my job to shoot back. So we did that. Now, a few times we had some fun times. We were going out to special forces camps, and we would bring them resupplies, and we would go and visit the little villages that they were in. So I got to see an awful lot of Vietnam, and I loved it. I loved a lot of the people out in the villages. Didn't like it when people shoot at you, but the villages and the people were very, very friendly. So comes March, and they said, all right, everybody's going back up to Da Nang. So we went up and we reformed and became a assault helicopter company. And they said, Carlson, you're going to be on a gunship. And I says, okay. And the gunship was a little different because our only missions were security and combat assault. And instead of having a machine gun that was on a mount, we had a free gun, which meant that it was hanging from a bungee cord on the side. And so when you started shooting, you could just keep going. Well, unfortunately, some of the people would be shooting and they'd keep going. One of the guys shot the pilot in the foot. So he was no longer a gunner. Go figure. Another time we were flying, and we would play a game called high and low, because if we were bored, we'd go out there, we'd go looking for the enemy. It was reconnaissance. So one of the helicopters would go low and hope somebody would shoot at him, hoped somebody would shoot at him. Think about that. And there'd be another gunship behind, about way up there. They wouldn't see him, and then we'd scoop down and get him. Well, on one of those missions, I was on the low bird, and we had Mr. Easley flying. And Mr. Easley's going along. We're going along at rice paddies, about 10 feet over the rice paddies. We're going about 80 miles an hour flying. Absolutely exhilarating. And all of a sudden, I'm behind one of the rice paddies. This old Papa San gets up with a rifle and takes a shot at us. And Mr. Easley yells back, nobody shoots, he's mine. So, okay, here's the pilot. He's got 14 rockets that he can fire at him. He's got 4 machine guns that fire at the same time that he can control where they're shooting. So we figured, this guy's a goner. Mr. Easley pulls out his .45, sticks his hand out the window like John Wayne, and started shooting. We're laughing so hard, he never got that guy. But, it was just hilarious. Mr. Easley, you're not the man. Another time, Captain Hill had a similar experience, only he didn't say he's mine. He says, I'll take care of it. And he proceeded to shoot 14 rockets at the one spot. The guy was probably down in this foxhole, way down below. So there's a big hole in the ground, but we never saw nothing after that. Other times we had some experiences that were not so good. We never had communication with the Marines on the ground. And we were flying up near the DMZ, and we could see a Marine patrol going into an ambush. We tried to contact them, we couldn't, so finally we just started shooting at the enemy. So we're shooting at them maybe 50 feet, 100 feet in front of them, but our hot brass is falling down on the Marines. They think we're shooting at them. But they stopped going, and things worked out well. So I did that time. I got out of the Army. After they said, please stay over here. Please re-enlist. We're going to make you a sergeant. We're going to have to do this and this. Now I've taken my chances. I'm going to get out. So I got out, and 10 years later, I watched a snowstorm in the Northeast, and I saw the National Guard was doing something. I said, you know what? I probably belong in the National Guard. So I went to my wife. We just had our 3rd child. I just graduated from community college with my associate's degree. I says, honey, I'll go in it for 1 year. That was in 1978, and I followed through with my promise, and I got out in 2007. So that's my story.
Our next speaker, Lieutenant Commander John Wainianpa. Did I say that right? You did.
Thank you. Anchors away. I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but part of my unique military veteran experience has been that I spent, according to my DD 214, 20 years, 1 month, and 19 days in the United States Navy, and I never spent the night aboard a vessel. That's somewhat of a remarkable achievement or embarrassment, depending on how you look at it. The program has me listed as a Vietnam-era vet, which is true. I consider myself a Cold Warrior. My initial trip into the Navy was through the Boston Navy Yard, where I enlisted in the Navy the day I would have been conscripted into the Army, courtesy of my letter from him, President Nixon. And I went to electronics training, boot camp in Great Lakes, electronics training in Dam Neck, Virginia Beach, where I was trained to be a fleet ballistic missile submarine electronics technician in charge of the ship's inertial navigation system. A Cold Warrior because the ballistic missile submarines were the Navy's nuclear arm in the nuclear triad. I got orders to the USS Francis Scott Key, but in the meantime, somebody got wind of the fact that I had applied for the Navy Enlisted Scientific Education Program. So instead of being assigned to a submarine, I got assigned to the commander of Submarine Flotilla 2 in New London, Connecticut, and I was the phone watch. So I got to answer the questions from all the officers in the office on things like, Wayne, February's too short. I need another day this month. So I said, aye, aye, sir, I'll call Smitty in supply and I'll order you an extra day. And if those of you who know the supply system, if you've got a federal stock number, Smitty can order you something, whatever it is that goes with that stock number. So I called supply and I said, Smitty, Commander Maxey needs another day this month. And he said, Roger that. He said, give me the stock number and I'll order you one. Well, that was one of my missions that I failed in because I didn't have the stock number for the extra day. I got picked up to finish my college degree at the University of New Mexico. And after that, I wound up going to flight training in Pensacola, Florida, then Corpus Christi, Texas. And Mama had a troubled pregnancy, so instead of getting orders to the fleet, I wound up being another 2 years in Corpus Christi, Texas as a flight instructor, which was an interesting experience. When Mom came to visit, she said, "You're getting gray." And I said, "Mom, I'm 28 years old. I'm a flight instructor. I'm entitled to every one of those grays." I finally got orders to the P-3 squadron in Jacksonville, Florida. And I became a Cold Warrior of a different type. We hunted the Soviet ballistic missile submarines off the east coast of the United States. I got the joy of deploying to Keflavik, Iceland for 6 months. A couple of years later, Sigonella, Sicily, hunting Soviet submarines in the Mediterranean. And then my last deployment was to the arduous duty station of Bermuda. And we were able to take the family over for that one, although they didn't see much of me because we were flying on those Soviet submarines and keeping track of them off the coast of the U.S. The Navy then sent me to the Naval Postgraduate School to get a degree in aeronautical engineering. And my specialty was laser physics. So when I graduated, I had more physics courses than the physics majors. As a result of that, and my P3 experience, they send me to the Operations Center in Okinawa to direct where the P3s that were deployed to Okinawa were hunting Soviet submarines in the Pacific. And we had some fun working with the Japanese in collaboration. I actually got a chance to fly on a Japanese P-2 airplane, hunting submarines with them. After that, I was selected for plank ownership in the then fledgling Naval Space Command. So I was the first launch and control systems officer in the Naval Space Command in Dahlgren, Virginia. And as a result of that experience, I was the only one suitable for assignment to U.S. Space Command as the launch and control systems officer in Colorado Springs. So my last tour in the Navy, I was in the Rocky Mountain Navy in 1986 to 1988. So part of my history in the military is as kind of a pioneer, because now we know that we have a U.S. Space Force. Well, I was part of the two commands that led up to the creation of the U.S. Space Force. I want to say thank you to all you vets who have served in combat. I was qualified as a nuclear weapons delivery pilot. And if you like, I can share some experiences of what that meant as a P-3 pilot. But I want to say thank you for those of you who have served in harm's way. And I also want to say thank you for Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Center for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. And Dave, I'd like for you to know that I share a mission with you in that I am the Northeast area representative for the Post-Traumatic Growth Institute. And we also want to deal with post-traumatic stress and its impact on vets in particular, and how we can prevent veteran suicide. And if you join us for Veterans Rendezvous in the spring, you can hear some more about the Post-Traumatic Growth Institute. I'll be speaking there. Thank you. Happy Veterans Day.
I would just like to personally thank the speakers today. It's not easy to come up here and talk about your experiences in front of this group, and I think you all did an outstanding job. Thank you very much. And now I'll bring this tall drink of water back to the mic. He has something else to do.
You know, as you sat here and listened to these true Americans, every story is different, every story is unique. Every single veteran has a very unique story. And most veterans who you engage will say, we did what we were supposed to do. We raised our right hand. And that is true. I like to tell people, I have two types of people that come into my office. People that are seeking help and people that want to help. And for our organization to collaborate with community partners, our state delegation, Kip, you guys are amazing. I think Matt's still here. Is Matt Levesque still here? And your fellow counselors, some of you are here this morning. New Secretary of Veterans Service, Executive Office of Veterans Services, John Santiago, who I was texting with earlier in the week, and I'm excited about what that looks like. But and before I go any further, I forgot to mention one of my teammates, one of my most talented mentor type. As long as I do what he says, I'm okay. And it's Brian Wiener. Brian, thank you very much. Brian's been in the nonprofit world for a hell of a lot longer than he'd like to think I was alive, but it's true. I know. You've been doing this an awful long time, Brian. And I failed to acknowledge him earlier. But When you look at the video that we just shared before the speakers and the signs that are around here, the reason we're able to accomplish all of those things that we do, which right now, the numbers that you saw in that video, which were not that long ago, we're now averaging 230 families a week in the food pantry. It was 205 when we did that video back in September. We're, Angela, what are we doing, 150 rides a month average? Yeah. 150 rides. And those veterans are going to very important medical appointments. We're housing veterans this morning. 6 and 10 veterans woke up in housing that we're providing. They have a warm bed, a roof over their head, plenty of food, and an opportunity to figure out what's their next step, okay? We have great case management and counseling. Dr. Mishkin is not here. Dr. Mishkin is amazing. And the reason we're able to do that is because people trust us. We say we will do what we do, and we execute it. And again, we have great partners at the state level, great partners at the local level, the county level. As Brian would tell you now, in 2 years, we have donors and foundations reaching out to us and encouraging us to, inviting us to participate in what they are offering in terms of resource. But there is one community partner that are here today, and it's Easton Pools. And Easton Pools, in more than 2 years, has committed over $100,000 to our organization. Think about that. $100,000. And how did you accomplish that, you might ask? Well, I'm going to tell you. We sold raffle tickets for a plunge pool. And you might ask, what the hell is a plunge pool? And it's amazing. It can be almost anything you want it to be. It can fit in almost any space. But I'm going to invite Dave Hobaker and Tim Doolin from Easton Pools to come up. Because this morning, we are going to announce, correct, the winner of this year's raffle. And I want Dave, come on up. Tim, please come on up. These guys are amazing, and I just want to give you the opportunity to say that. Thank you.
I have to lower this a little bit. Thank you, Jim. I've got a couple prepared notes, so I'll try to keep this quick. But I'd like to thank all of the speakers here today for sharing their amazing stories. It's an honor and honestly quite humbling standing in front of all of you here today. And for all the veterans and families of veterans in attendance, I'd like to thank you for the many sacrifices you made in serving our country. Along with my brother Bob, I'm the second generation owner of Easton Pool and Spa. My dad started the business over 50 years ago, and I can honestly tell you that if it weren't for the 4 years he spent in the Air Force in the early 50s, I wouldn't be here today. And as a side note, First Lieutenant Jones, if you ever flew in or out of Elmendorf Air Force Base from 1951 to 54, he may have been watching out for you on radar. My dad loved the time he spent serving our country, and his time in the Air Force truly gave him the tools he needed to be successful in life. For that reason and many more, we're thrilled to help support the Cape and Islands Veteran Outreach Center. As many of you may know, and as Jim mentioned, we held a raffle 2 years ago for a fully installed plunge pool. What the heck is a plunge pool? Well, it's basically a precast pool that we basically install with a crane. It's a much quicker build, it's easier to maintain, and takes up a smaller space. The raffle 2 years ago was such a big success that we reached out to Mike and Jim this spring and set out to do it again this year. I'm proud to announce that last night we closed the raffle, and we raised, so far, with more donations coming in, over $60,000 with 100%. Thank you. Thank you. And 100% of those proceeds go directly to Civic. So I'd like to turn the mic over to our company president, Tim Doolin, who has a few words to add and who will announce the raffle winner.
Good morning, everyone. It really is an honor and a privilege to be here. Unlike Dave, I have no prepared notes, so which my wife is in the back row isn't going to be too pleased with me. I remember as a young Marine on Parris Island myself, a lot of thoughts go through your head in those early days. One is, what the hell did I just get myself into? Another thought is I had the privilege as a young man to meet Father Rochford. He was the Navy chaplain at the time, and he shared some words with me one time that always resonated. The price of peace is a cost the protected will never know. And I think that those words embody this group pretty spectacularly this morning. So thank you all for your service. It's really an honor to be here. We did announce, we did run the raffle up in Easton this morning, and Matthew Lemoyne from Bridgewater, we haven't contacted him, is the winner. So we'll be giving him a call later today, and I can assure you, I'm speaking for Dave and the whole organization. We're committed to this group, and we'll be doing this every year from here on out. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. In conclusion, I just want to thank my staff for everything, our team, not my staff, our team, for everything they did this week. Mostly, they probably liked it better when I wasn't around, right? Yeah, look at the smiles on their face. Especially my managers, they don't need to deal with me. But I really appreciate everything you've done. And today is a very special day for everyone who has worn the uniform or continues to wear the uniform. And I just want to acknowledge one other gentleman in the room who kind of goes behind the scenes, does a lot of different things. You talk about community partners. This is my friend, dear friend Steve from Coach Light Carpets. Hi, buddy. You thought you were getting away with it, didn't you? Steve drops off on a regular basis and supports our food pantry. He just shows up with stuff. He said, this was on sale. Here, I went and did this. I went and did this. And this afternoon, you're taking about 35 guys to lunch or dinner or something. 40 now. Oh, you got 40 for lunch. Wow. Dinner. On you. Isn't that amazing? How about that? Absolutely amazing. Barbara Ann, do I have anything else? Are we good? Anything else, Mike? Brian? Nope. Sir? Carry on with the plan of the day. Enjoy everything. Thank you again, Hyanna Selks, for supporting us. And have a great rest of your day. Could I have the 6 speakers up here for a photo, please? The 6 speakers for a photo.